Hey, thanks, Ben. You need a haircut at some point. We'll go in together, but
It's called the COVID cut.
yeah, it is a COVID cut. I haven't put a mask on since March, so it's been a while. Ben, thanks for showing up early at 7:18 a.m. on a Sunday, November 8th, 2020. My panel today is Dr. Steve Smith, Dr. James Choo, and Holly, I hate mornings, Lawson. Early mornings. All right, so our table of discussion would have to start off with it's not red states, it's not blue states, it's United States of America. And we just had an election. We wanted to bring Dr. Steve Smith. Chewy and I talked about bringing Doc back in. It's been a while, a long time, from March or April when he started with this. And we've got a lot of feedback from Dr. Smith coming from a planet of Mars or Pluto because of his thoughts and his information, but it actually is lined up pretty close to in the 90 percentile of stuff.
No, it's great.
In my opinion. No.
Better than 90.
Not bad.
Oh, man.
All right, so welcome, Dr. Smith, back, and Chewy and Doc. Let's go. Let's rock and roll with do we have a new president? And when can we take the mask off? And how many people are actually dying? Because there's people still in the wood gym that are still scared because they heard that Florida cases are up.
They're up everywhere that there's controversy about the voting.
In what states would those be? Would Florida be one of them?
No, Florida's settled.
Are we still? I have two doctors on the panel. Are we still in a pandemic?
We've never had one.
So when you say that, the question will be, well, where are these deaths coming from? So when you that's going to be the primary question.
Well, using the CDC's own data, which we know gets manipulated with the flus, but their own data shows a slightly lower total death rate this year than in 2019.
All-cause mortality,
which is hard to alter that figure. So this year, through the third quarter, the U.S. is averaging 236,000 deaths per month.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, in 2019, they averaged 238,000 per month. In 17 and 18, they averaged approximately what it is this year. So it's in the same ballpark. So by definition, we don't have a pandemic because the total deaths, even with the increase in suicides, homicides,
mm-hmm.
and there are COVID deaths just from the narrative, but there has never been an intact virus identified, and the test that they're using to prop up the entire narrative is a faulty test that's not approved for diagnostic purposes.
You're talking about the PCR.
The PCR test, which we've mentioned before.
Right. So if that's the case, then if I were to bring up that point to other providers in the area, they'll say, well, there are people on the vent right now in the ICU, and there are all of these protocols for COVID to save these people's lives on the vent. What would you say to those providers and doctors who say, well, this person is COVID positive, we have to do all of these new protocols with some of these patients are having some bleeding issues that they would say is novel and part of the pathophysiology of the disease and whatnot. What do you think that they are seeing according to your thoughts?
Well, first of all, you have to look at the fundamentals. What is this narrative based on? We have no new virus identified. We have short mRNA segments that were reportedly harvested from symptomatic lungs in China. We have a test that's not approved for diagnostic purposes, so the whole foundation of a narrative is faulty. So we have to start with that. Okay, maybe there are some new symptoms. They haven't been identified with a new disease. The Koch's postulates, which have never been satisfied, not even the first step has been identified, which is the gold standard for a new disease process. You have to identify a set of symptoms. You have to identify a pathogen. You have to purify the pathogen and introduce it to another host, and then you have to obtain it from that host after the same set of symptoms. The first step has not been satisfied for COVID-19. And furthermore, there's much supporting evidence to show there's evidence that this entire narrative was planned at the World Economic Forum in 2017 in Davos, Switzerland. You can find evidence of that going all the way back. So anyone that's interested can do research and find that. This is a fact, and this business data released from the World International Trade Society showed that the United States received over 3 million COVID-19 test kits, labeled as COVID-19 test kits, at the end of 2017 and during 2018, and millions to other countries around the world as well. So there was obviously pre-planning. The other thing, the entire coronavirus industry started in 1999. Patents started being granted for coronaviruses, for test kits, and for vaccines. 1999. 21 years the coronavirus industry has been alive. So this is not
Some would
new.
say that there always been coronaviruses, right?
Of course.
About 4 or so that are part of the common cold
Well, see,
endemic virus, right?
There's lots of supporting evidence that this was pre-planned. And of course, I mean, we talked about the mask issue. I mean, there are no studies, reproducible, prospective, randomized studies that show that a cloth mask, even N95 masks, do anything to prevent the spread of a virus or disease. And the N95 mask, this is something a lot of people don't understand. The exhaust from an N95 mask is totally direct to the environment. So it doesn't protect people around you.
Right, because that is the CDC narrative right now, is that if you are not wearing a mask, you are the spreader of diseases. But in fact, when you exhale through a mask, it is not stopping the exhalation of particles, especially if you've got any type of cloth from any type of fabric whatsoever. You're not stopping the spread of air particles.
Well, this is something that, looking at these studies that people quote, and the foundational paper in the Lancet from the Chinese authors,
right?
They've admitted that they did not isolate a whole intact virus. So the whole premise is wrong, and we're supposed to, even if it was true, we're supposed to believe the Chinese. I mean, really, and no one's ever questioned it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at this point in time, we should be questioning all of the data that's coming from China. I believe, and if you don't question it and reproduce it, that's the hallmark of good science.
Reproducible science.
Let's take that data. If we want to believe the Chinese data on face value, what we have to do as scientists is reproduce that data here in America. And if we cannot do that, then the findings are not valid. So have we done that? As far as I know, we have not done that. So that's problematic. If that's science 101, and if we haven't done that, then we need to stop making decisions that are not based off of a solid foundation of science.
Well, we were talking about the PCR test. The primers they use, because it's an amplification, a manufacturing process. It's not a diagnostic test. But the primers they use to start the process of amplification are consistent with a segment on chromosome 8 in humans. So if you use that as a primer, everyone could be positive if you amplify it enough.
Well, and the amplification has been increased. Is that right? As
Yes.
far as the COVID-19?
It's a totally faulty test. It's 100%. They talk about false positives. Well, they're 100% unreliable. It should be stopped immediately. If we stop the PCR test today, no pandemic, because there's no positive tests. We've never tested asymptomatic people, large numbers of asymptomatic people before.
Right.
So if we had tested people last year with the same test, we'd have the same results this year. It's all garbage.
The other issue too is,
well, isn't the vaccine going to clear it all?
Well, if you don't have a pathogen, how do you make a vaccine to something you don't have?
Aren't they almost there?
And I mean, the COVID-19 vaccine is the epitome of fake science, because not only do you not have a pathogen, but you don't have a control group. You know what they're using as the control in these studies? They're using the meningitis vaccine as a control, which is known to have death and destruction as side effects. That's their control.
Not an inert placebo, then.
No vaccines have ever had an inert placebo control group. When they talk about when they talk about placebos, it's a known vaccine or a known adjuvant or excipient that has side effects, and that's what they control the new one to. It's totally fake science. We've been scammed since the beginning of vaccines.
Well, I don't know about the inert placebo. Well, the meningitis vaccine as the control. I didn't know that. But if that's the case, then we're not using the gold standard is to use an inert placebo, right? And
it's never been used,
which is
on any of the vaccines,
which is a very strange idea to me. If we're using another vaccine as a control, I mean that doesn't really make.
How many doctors know that?
I don't. I never knew that. So I would be. Probably most doctors don't know that. I would say.
I'd say you're correct.
Yeah. That's a very strange way to do a test. And actually, some of these tests for vaccines have been halted. Right? So I think the AstraZeneca trial stopped.
Well,
because of some problems that they were having in the phase.
Well, there was a death too, but we don't really know what it is they're testing. We can't trust the pharmaceutical companies because they've been putting birth control in vaccines for a while. And they started with the Gardasil. So if they're putting things in and they're not liable from the 1986 Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, the very name of the act tells us that there's problems. And so we can't trust them because they put things in there that they label them with different letters and numbers and so forth instead of telling you what it actually is. And then when they put things in there they don't want you to know about, they say it's proprietary, so it's secret. So we can't trust the entire industry. It's faulty.
Are you talking about the immunogens that are in the vaccines that they actually have proprietary ingredients, essentially, that are not transparent in as far as labeling is concerned for us to know exactly what those immune enhancers are?
That and the other, what they call excipients. See, they don't call it ingredients because when people search things for ingredients, nothing comes up. So you have to know that it's called excipients, like the formaldehyde and the polysorbate 80, aluminum, mercury, and all the other things they put in, the other toxins.
Thimerosal for some in the past.
Right.
Right.
And kidney cancer cells from monkeys in the polio.
Well, what's the purpose of putting these things in there?
Well, that would be speculation, but it can't be good.
So let's.
There's nothing that I've read.
Chad's ran away. I don't know where he went.
There's not anything in there that's going to enhance your health that I've identified.
Well, so how is it that if I wouldn't, since
I'm still for free choice though. People should get informed consent for vaccines like any other invasive medical procedure because that's what it is, and they should know the risks, benefits, and possible complications. And if they want it, they should get it. So I'm for freedom of choice.
Right.
But people, if they do their homework, I think they'll start questioning more and more. And I think a lot of people are doing that now.
Well, I think if I were to be on the fence of this issue, I think there were a lot of questions things I'd never heard of before as far as vaccines were concerned, because I just took everything on face value. Then looking at the vaccine schedule and some of the information that you were telling me, I was like, well, why do we have so much so early as far as vaccines are concerned? Maybe it is for the purposes of helping with disease and the disease burden, and also keeping our kids safe. But at the same time, I did have some particular questions about why one particular vaccine that I thought was bothersome to me as far as the narrative of why we give it so early, and that's the hepatitis B vaccine. So I'm not questioning all vaccines. I think maybe some of them are good. I don't know. I'd have to do some more digging. But
we've gotten a little off topic from what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
But it's all related.
Right. So,
because the COVID-19 vaccine is one of the end goals of this whole narrative is to force the COVID-19 vaccination, which has nothing to do with the virus.
Forced vaccination is definitely, as far as going to school, maybe even going to some pediatricians' offices, there are some heavy pressures to go along with the entire vaccine schedule. That's for sure. We're running into that with our own kids. I mean, if we were to one question I had was the hepatitis B vaccine. Okay, so hepatitis B is primarily passed to risky homosexual activities originally, and also IV drug abusers. And so when I'm thinking about diseases, okay, and who is most susceptible to diseases, so if there's a vaccine for, say, the dengue fever, okay, well, if I am in an area, a tropical area that has that particular disease, okay, maybe having a vaccine in that area makes some sense because I would be exposed potentially to the disease itself because I would be in a more risky area. So
but you're still making an assumption that it has been proven to be effective.
So hear me out. Say it is effective, okay? But the reason why we don't have forced dengue fever vaccinations here in Tennessee is because there is no dengue fever here in Tennessee, right? So
you said forced. See, forced is unconstitutional.
But so there is no risk to me or my family for that particular disease because we're not an at-risk population, right? There is no disease here. So here's my
why
my
is
point.
it not here? It's infrastructure.
Well, here's the other issue. Well, it could be that particular disease doesn't live in this climate as well, but here's the other issue. So if my wife and I are not at risk population, so if we're not engaging in risky homosexual activity, or my wife or I are not IV
that would
drug
depend
abuse,
on her gender, though.
IV drug abuse, right? So if I'm not an IV drug abuser, why is it that my newborn child has to have the hepatitis B vaccine in order to complete the schedule? So it doesn't make any sense to me. If you think about it in those terms, why does my newborn child have to have a hepatitis B vaccine immediately, the first shot? So it doesn't.
Well, there's many things wrong with that.
At risk at all. Okay, you can talk to us about our histories and everything else. We're not an at-risk population. Why does my child have to have a hepatitis B vaccine immediately from birth? That was a question that I never thought about. All of my kids had the vaccine at that point in time. But I started looking at that question and saying, well, we need to look at the risk of the individual for the particular disease. And if you are not at risk, then why do you have to have, as part of the mandated schedule, something like that, a hepatitis B vaccine right then and there? It doesn't make any sense to me.
First of all, there should be no mandated schedule. There could be recommended schedule.
Right.
But who drives the schedule? Who sets up the schedule?
CDC.
And who runs the CDC?
You would say pharma.
Of course.
Yeah.
They totally control it. And the CDC has patents on some of the vaccines, so they have a conflict of interest. But let's just say all that's above board. Why would you give any vaccine to a newborn? Their immune system isn't active until a minimum of 12 months, but between 12 and 24 months. So if their immune system isn't active, what they're going on is on passive immunity from the mother at that point. So it makes no biological sense to give any vaccines to a newborn, even if they worked.
So here's the other question then.
And it's lowest common denominator. They started doing it to IV drug mothers and known high-risk people, and so they just made it a policy for everyone because they can sell more vaccines. Anything that has something that's not going along with the mainstream media narrative, they're trying to ban. I mean, Twitter's blocking the president now. Can you imagine that? I mean, we're living in a banana republic. They're trying to steal the election now.
So do you think we're headed towards a revolution?
Well, I think we've been in the middle of one for some time. When you have anarchists in the streets burning buildings and saying they're peaceful protesters, I think that would be considered a revolution. It's the same playbook that's been used in the past during World War II and other conflicts. And it's the same people that are still running the show. International banksters, the British Crown, and the Vatican.
So has the COVID-19 served its purpose?
Well, it's still ongoing, but it's served many purposes. And this is, let's go back to the original narrative that a virus that was begun in the wet market in China, or it could have been a manufactured virus from the Wuhan lab. Either one of those narratives is totally faulty. Even if they're true, viruses mutate frequently. So it's not possible for a single strain of a virus to go around the world unaltered from person to person. Totally mystical. So even if that was true, and since no one has come forth with a whole intact COVID-19 virus, we have to say that it's faulty at this point. But even if that narrative was true, what we have in the U.S. is not what they would have there, even with people traveling and so forth. When people have seasonal flu symptoms, people have billions of viruses in their body. When they get flu symptoms, it is very rarely what the media has been telling us is going around this year. That's a narrative to sell vaccines, flu vaccines. So flu-like symptoms are really what people get, and they can get them year-round, but they get them more in the fall and winter because they get less sun exposure, they're indoors, and they don't get exercise. There's a lot of different reasons your immune system becomes compromised. But
but you bring up a great point. What happened to the flu? You don't.
We had no flu last year.
Right. You don't hear about anything anymore. You
about the flu, yeah.
Cold, head colds, chest colds. Flus.
You're not allowed to have that. And if you have any symptom of anything, it's COVID. And you must get tested with a faulty test. Yeah, it must get. If you lose smell with a cold, then you have COVID.
Yes.
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 I mean, people need to wake up and they need to stop. I mean, we have no pandemic. You need to throw your mask away. You need to start. We want our life back. There's no reason for this nonsense other than political tyranny.
And both docs, this is a really valid question. I don't understand the inconsistency or consistency of the masks. Of you have to wear it walking into the restaurant, and get seated. And then after that, you can take it off because then you can't get it.
Right. It doesn't make any sense.
And then you're threatened and bullied
Yeah.
to not be able to leave unless you put your mask on to walk out.
That happened to you in China, correct? Holly?
Yes, it did. And I did not wear the mask out. And she did not get a tip.
Yeah,
but it was targeting. It was at the level.
That's a 15-yarder and a fine.
Or you get kicked out of a game because you just laid somebody out pretty strong. Okay.
Yeah. So and well, if you want to talk about the football games, well, the refs and the coaches have to wear the mask, but the players stand right next to the coach.
The high school refs don't have to wear the masks
No, they don't.
because you can't get COVID in high school, but college. I watched the Catholic Baylor game on TV on a Thursday night, and the refs didn't. There was nothing. It wasn't these scarves, these new things that making money off of with all the propaganda.
I feel so sorry for these older refs in these games. They're already having trouble sometimes. Now they got a mask and a muzzle on.
Yeah.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
It's kind of insane though. But I was watching a football game yesterday, and the college players are no masks, but the coach has to wear the mask,
or else he'll get fined.
Right. So if you're trying to keep everyone safe, like you
It's part
can
of
get
the
on
narrative.
the
Even better,
fence.
I watched the game. I watched it last night or yesterday, and they've already ditched the bottles of water that they were doing 4 or 5 weeks ago. They're back to the old Gatorade squirt bottles that they just put back in and people squirt. I watched the trainer do that on the sidelines, and I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like,
you're either all in or you're all out. I mean, so you can't be this half-measured issue and then say, well, we're doing something. It doesn't make none of it makes any sense.
Well, see, these mask mandates that's a medical procedure to wear a mask. And there's no science to back it up.
Right.
So what the hell is going on?
But why do the children not have to?
I noticed that on the
doesn't make any sense either. I mean,
I was voting the other day. I was the only one in there without a mask. They didn't say anything to me. But then you have 10, 12-year-olds that are out of school because it's closed for the election, walking around without a mask. So they don't give it to anybody? It makes
it doesn't exist, so they can't give it to anybody.
I agree, but I'm just saying, why does not everybody go, that's just silly. Has no common sense.
Well,
no one does.
The public has undergone mass psyops, psychological operations, CIA techniques for years, and it shows how lacking people are with critical thinking skills now.
Well, how dare you shame the mask? Like that's
But think about it. See, all this shaming and the white privilege and microaggressions and transgenderism and homosexuality, all this stuff has been a narrative to break down our society. If you read the background of how do you break down a society, all these little techniques, and political correct speech, all these things break down societies. And so if people will wake up and realize what's going on, we need to get back to bullying and having normal life, because nature bullies people.
Yeah.
Overt bullying is not good business in a capitalist society, so it really plays out. But young kids, if they don't get a little bit of bullying, they don't develop adult skills so they can handle life. Then they get to be an adult and they think, oh gosh, I don't get a trophy today. I mean, life's supposed to be so easy and I deserve this and I deserve that. And it's not reality. And that's what we're living with. So we're paying for years of transgression in this country. We've gotten away from God. We've gotten away from personal responsibility, work ethic, taking care of your own family. And so that's what we're dealing with right now with this election. I think when it all... The corruption is massive and it's right in your face now,
but it worked, right? Or we
well,
it worked.
It
depends on your perspective if it works. I mean, it's been working for the people behind it. Yeah, it's been working for them, but I also think, despite all the media censorship, the best thing you can do to get information out is to censor it, because then it gets, at the grassroots level, it gets spread like wildfire. And no matter how much censoring they do, you can't hold back the masses of people, and they're starting to wake up. In Europe, they're about to start pulling some of their politicians out of buildings and lynching them because I
think that's angry. One of the staggering censorship issues that I've seen is that if you were to look at what had happened in Berlin, Germany, we don't hear anything about what happened in Berlin, where upwards to some estimates 800 to 1.3 million people were out in the streets in Berlin. Some would say the largest amounts of Germans protesting since before World War II, maybe in history, modern history. The media said that there were 38,000 Germans in the streets of Berlin. That was, I don't know if you've actually seen the pictures and the video footage. There are 38,000, maybe 100,000 people just in one crowd in their main square. And then you see some of the footage that pulled back. It is packed to the gills with Germans who are fed up with the mandates, with the lack of freedom in their country. It's shocking that we don't even have any of that coverage here in the United States. But
control of the global media is very powerful, as we're seeing. And we've talked, but the global media is owned by the same trust company. That's why they have the same narrative, and they've controlled the global narrative. So,
are the Germans going to be able to celebrate Thanksgiving? Because was it you guys that sent me the protocol?
Oh, from California, the governors.
You got to put your mask on between bites to be safe.
I've witnessed that before. Yeah, but the Thanksgiving protocols, did you guys not see those?
Yeah,
I
yes,
just
for
ignored
sure.
them.
From the governor in California.
2 at a time in the bathroom,
And you have to clean it after every.
Well,
everywhere
people,
it goes.
one of the things you're asking about the respiratory symptoms, I think the cleaning fluids are causing chemical burns for one thing, and probably people are getting sick from wearing the stinking mask because a lot of those have chemicals in them too. And I think vaping probably has something. Chemtrails, which are a real thing, probably are being used. The 5G technology, some people believe that causes flu symptoms. So there's a lot of other things. And there's a paper by the Wolf who evaluated military personnel. If you've had one or more flu shots in the last 5 years, you're 36% more likely to test positive on a COVID test. So they may have been putting coronaviruses or other things in the flu vaccines. Who knows? There's some things we know for sure. There's some things that are possible. There's some things that are probable. And then there's things that are patently false. But there's supporting evidence that there may be things in the flu shots that are making people sick or other, it could be in the water. We already have fluoride in the water that makes some people sick.
So we'd probably at some point in time talk to an ICU doc. I don't know any in this area that would maybe they would have some different thoughts on what they're seeing. But
their assumption. I've talked to some, and their assumption is we've got sick people, so there's COVID. Yeah. It's like, well, yeah, but no one has shown that there is. So yeah, your people are sick, but we haven't identified what they're sick from. Sometimes they have pneumonia. And I know of a case of somebody that died with pneumonia, but they had been sort of pushed off to the side because they were COVID and they were, afraid of getting spread from that patient.
What's interesting to me, I think I want to bring up this really important point as far as disease burden and what's going on in our community right now. There's real data.
Let me make one more comment. When have you had hospitals during a pandemic that were firing nurses and had beds empty?
Yeah, that happened earlier.
It happens all over the country.
Yeah.
But the narrative is that they're packed and they don't have room for them.
Right.
But that's not true.
Well, here is the narrative that helped shut down the economy was that we have to flatten the curve because our medical system would be overburdened and there would be more deaths on top of deaths because we wouldn't have enough ventilators. We didn't have enough medical equipment. We didn't have enough of any of this stuff. And that was going to happen. And their predictive model said it was going to happen in spite of a shutdown.
And as it turns out, we should have had much less ventilators.
Because
people shouldn't be put on ventilators unless it's the only option left.
What actually happened was that the hospitals were completely empty, especially in our area, completely empty. Nothing happened. The predictive models said that there were going to be a certain amount of deaths in Tennessee, Vanderbilt, our area. They were going to be overwhelmed. We were going to have to build military beds over at the Knoxville Expo Center. And what happened? There's nothing that happened. Nothing that happened.
Well, you always have to look back and see what
but I
lessons.
think people have forgotten that.
What lessons are learned when there's an event, and we need to look. Okay, what happened? Okay, the big multinational corporations got more wealthy and more powerful. Mom and pop shops got shut down, put out of business, restaurants. Mm-hmm. So there's more and more control. There's more tyranny that's been implemented. There's more loss of personal rights and privileges, the ability to travel and move, ability to
go to
conduct commerce. So all these things, you look at when somebody benefits from a narrative, they're usually involved in it. And so the people that push this narrative are the ones that have the patents on the vaccines, on the test kits, and the people that have profited on their businesses.
So here's an important local point here in Knoxville. Okay, so if we were looking at COVID data and all that, we've beaten that to a pulp at this point in time. But let's talk about some real issues, real data in our area as a result of some of these measures that have isolated individuals, that have heightened the fears for all around us. Okay, so I talk a lot about our at-risk populations, dispossessed individuals who've struggled prior to COVID. Okay, so we're talking about those people that are having issues with drug abuse, that have had issues with crime and whatnot. So what is going on locally is that the shootings in Knoxville have increased. Homicides have increased.
Do you have the latest number on the homicides?
It's up above last year already. So, and we're not the year's not over as far as the number of shootings and deaths as a result of shootings.
The suicides, I haven't looked at it in the last month, but they were much higher than the COVID deaths.
Yeah. So the other issues that are going on, alcohol-related deaths, are through the roof. When I talk to individuals at work at some of the hospital systems here, they would remark that what is staggering on the floors, not the COVID issues, the amount of alcohol-related deaths that are going on the floors. Okay, 30 and 40-year-olds that are dying from alcohol-related issues. But we're not talking about it.
But liquor stores were still open because they were violent.
Well, alcohol sales
and you could walk out with alcohol at restaurants.
Are up by 40% around the area. So the drug-related deaths are up because no one's getting services, no one's getting help anymore, no one's getting, and the amount of stress and isolation is exacerbated drug-related deaths. When we talked about this before, when I had a conversation with a human trafficking nonprofit group, that they were seeing an uptick in the amount of referrals by over double. And that was at the end of July. So they had 19 referrals for kids for their human trafficking, usually in a year, and they were up to 50 plus, and that was at the end of July. So when we're talking about those people most at risk, these dispossessed individuals, and you're talking about crime, you're talking about people who've had traumatic lives, they're getting it really, really badly right now. They're having a lot of problems in our areas, and we're not talking about that portion of it.
We haven't mentioned big picture, but we need to mention this because it's all part of this narrative, is that United Nations Agenda 2030, that used to be called Agenda 21. Part of that narrative is depopulation. They want to lower the world population down to 500 million or less. And that's part of the zero carbon emissions goal. First of all, no one's ever shown that carbon emissions are bad. That's what plants use to create cellulose and oxygen. But their other agenda is climate change taxes, Green New Deal. It's all the things we hear from the radical left in the U.S. is part of that narrative. They also want tracking devices, artificial intelligence for surveillance. That's what defund the police is about. They want no ownership of personal property. They want condensed high-rise living conditions. They want transhumanism, robot-controlled humans. They want sterile humans that they control birth rates and manufactured humans. So that's all part of the same narrative, is destruction of society and depopulation. So however they can create death and destruction is good for them.
So Agenda 2030, Agenda 21, where would, if someone wants to look at that information, where can they find it so that they can, don't believe us.
Go to the United Nations. They tell you. It's
on their website.
It's about a 70-page document, and the way they word it sounds all neat and fluffy, and it's really great. But and you can find lots of people that have evaluated it and tell you what different things mean in it. But it's ultimately one world government, total control of humans on Earth, no ownership of property, loss of all your personal rights. It's a very frightening thing, and it's all run by the globalists that are behind the COVID-19 and this whole narrative.
So if you want to do your homework, audience members, take a look at Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, and the World Economic Forum, and make your own decisions.
Agenda 21 started in 1992, and in 2015, it was changed to Agenda 2030. And the implementation is through the World Health Organization, which is the medical arm of the United Nations. And then the World Health Organization goes through each country. In our country, it's the CDC, but other countries have equivalent. And then the CDC goes to our local health departments, which is what we're dealing with now locally.
As far as pushing
the agenda, the mandates, the unconstitutional mandates, the lockdowns, the curfews, and all that is coming from the World Health Organization, in my opinion.
When do you think this will ever lighten up?
It won't lighten up until people realize that we're at war and they need to stand up and fight for their rights and fight for their lives. We still have a population that is waiting for it to blow over, and it's not going to blow over.
What do you say to those people that are entrenched and really fearful of coronavirus? A lot of people say, well, our most vulnerable, our 70-year-old grandma who's sick and has got a lot of illness. There are a lot of people that are deathly afraid to step out of their home right now. What do you say to those individuals?
Well, use your brain. We just told you the total death rates in the U.S. are slightly lower than last year. There's no pandemic.
I
think it's really hard to convince people one way or another at this point.
Choo and I battle that a lot in here of people not wanting to listen or.
If people can't think and have discernment and critical thinking, then you can't help them. And see, these globalists believe there's a lot of useless eaters on the earth, and maybe they're right.
Charlie.
I do love to eat.
So, how do you break? Because there's going to be a lot of people that aren't going to believe.
What I've seen in my personal life is that the amount of formal education is inversely proportional to critical thinking skills today.
So the more education that you have in the quote unquote system, the harder it is to break free from the dogma. Is that what you're saying?
My smartest patients are hillbillies from Appalachia. Mm-hmm. And I don't say hillbilly in a derogatory way. It's like, I hope I'm a hillbilly because they have common sense and they know exactly what's going on. It's amazing. And probably a lot of them don't even have a high school education, but they work with their hands every day.
That's what you're talking about, the farm.
Farming, yeah.
Right.
Nature.
Explain that.
They understand nature. Well, if you work on a farm, you have to deal with nature's rules every day. That means you get up and work, you take care of your animals, you take care of your fields. There's chores you have to do in order to sustain life. Your life and your family and your animals and your crops. And if you get up and do that every day, just surviving is a testament to your work ethic and your ingenuity. And we've gotten so far away from that. And of course, the underlying foundation is faith in God and the things that our country was founded on.
Chaz?
When do we get out of the mask, wear a mask, dumbass statements that now you're seeing in grocery stores, big billboards of people saying wear a mask?
Or they're using our taxpayer money for these propaganda commercials in this state. It's like, be a hero, wear a mask, it fights COVID. That's complete bullshit.
Well, to lend credence to that statement, if people want to see evidence,
we probably just got banned for that.
Yeah, I guess that's my biggest thing.
Evidence of mask or any type of medical intervention. Okay, and I think you said it best. We have to have a randomized prospective study that shows that an intervention works or does not work with placebo. And when it comes to masks, you have to do it on a population level. Unless we have that study in our hands and it's been reproduced, there is no hard science that an intervention works or does not work without that type of litmus test in order to figure out whether something is provable. So we have not done that. And I have not seen that study yet. And so for if we want to be scientific thinkers and you're mandating science along lines, will show us the science that is of that ilk, that is randomized, prospective, controlled, population-based level that shows that this thing works or does not work.
See,
and we have not done that. And so you cannot say that there is.
We have politicians making medical decisions without data and without authority in many cases. And the problems that we're dealing with in our state right now is that our legislature, when they passed the Emergency Powers Act, it gave the governor unconstitutional authority. The three branches of government are the executive, the legislative, and judicial. Each of those has duties and responsibilities, and it is unconstitutional for them to cede or to defer their responsibilities to another branch. And that's what happened with the Emergency Powers Act. So Governor Lee has unconstitutional authority that he then unconstitutionally delegated to these local health boards, which are unelected officials. According to our Constitution, they do not have the authority to make law or to make punishment or to control business. And that's what our local health board has been doing. And that's why we filed a lawsuit against that. And hopefully the law will be followed and we will prevail. But that has to stop. The other thing is in order to make medical mandates, you have to have data to support it. And we have we have faulty data. You have no evidence of a new virus. You have a faulty test that is not approved for diagnostic purposes. It's being used to prop up a false narrative and to create fear in people. And this has to stop.
What is the World Alliance?
So the World Doctors Alliance, it's a group of over 500 physicians and scientists in Europe, and they filed a class action lawsuit in the international court, which was similar to the Nuremberg trials. And they're holding certain politicians, scientists, and individuals accountable for crimes against humanity for the worldwide conspiracy called COVID-19. It's cost the lives and livelihoods of vast numbers of people. The politicians, scientists, and others that are promoting false science and individuals of influence who are complicit in propagating false pandemic narrative will be held accountable for their actions. So if they prevail in the international court, you're going to see similar findings to the Nuremberg trial, and people got death penalty over that and other penalties. And we have people in our country, elected politicians hide behind the acting in good faith philosophy, but once you get actual scientific information out, if they keep pushing the narrative of a false science and a false pandemic, at some point they're going to be criminals and they will be held accountable. And elected officials have to answer to their constituents, but these unelected officials have absolutely no legal authority to be making these mandates that they're doing.
The World Doctors Alliance, so if people want to look that up and see what type of information that you get. And sometimes when you're looking up these things, you can't oftentimes look at Google.
You can't go to Google. You have to go to an alternate site because they ban a lot of things.
A lot of the information that's out there is going to be very hard to find. I mean, even though you think that the world's most powerful search engine would be easy to have that information at the tip of your fingers, but at the same
who
time,
controls Google?
Alphabet company, right? Is that
no? Who controls Google?
You talking about the? Tell us.
Who controls the international media?
Right. You talking about the?
Well, the CIA has control over Google. The covert CIA that's working against the population.
Well, so finding this information. People need to look for themselves and see if you agree or not. But I think some of those interesting talking points, I think, are really, I think could open up some eyes, at least some thoughts for individuals. World Doctors Alliance, Agenda 2030, all of these things should be looked at. I mean, and whether you come up with the same conclusions or not is totally up to you. But some of this information is not going to be at your fingertips, and it's not going to be.
Well, just remember, every podcast that we've done, we have not presented any information that someone has proved to be false. And if they have, I'm happy to hear it and debate. And I'm willing to change my opinion on things if you present me facts. But I'm going to look at facts, and I'm going to have some critical thinking. And there's no critical thinking on this whole pandemic. It's complete BS.
Chaz Hawley, we want to hear from you guys.
Well, I mean,
I agree.
Chewy, I know that you're maybe in a rock and a hard place sometimes with your community, but you've always had Steve's back on so much of this information, and I think it's at a point to where you have to, like Steve has been saying for 4 to 5, 6 months.
Longer,
I
much
was gonna
longer.
say
Longer, but
Yeah,
since we've been on here, right? Of course. I mean, he's always had his. Ever since I've known him, you know where Steve Smith walks. You know that he does his thing, and he makes the point of what happened to common sense, because I'm not the scientist and the smart population.
But you're a hillbilly.
I'm a hillbilly.
Yeah.
and I don't understand how people can't. And we know people. You and I know people.
Yeah.
We see people. I know Dr. Smith sees people, and it's so turned upside down. Of again, I mean, you look at the simple things of Halloween was taken away. Are we trick or treating this year? We don't know if we.
Well, you
are.
can use tongs though or a chute. You can put candy in it. Oh.
Are you kidding me? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, has that been stated? I mean, it sounds right. Or people left.
Oh, those were guidelines.
Those were guidelines. They were? Really?
Yes.
Now, come on, man. Now,
come on, man.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How does that? And that's what he sat here in April and talked about, Choo.
Yeah.
It's not how. And then, like, we talked about, you take away health. Everybody closed down the gyms. That poor New Jersey owner of that gym. Yeah. That could have been me if I stayed there.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, isolation of healthy humans is bad for your immune system. You need stimulation, interaction. We share bacteria, viruses all the time. It's part of normal life. And besides the positive mental aspect. And so all this stuff is to break down society, to control people, tyranny. I mean, it's so simple to see it if you know what their playbook is.
Well, I had an interesting conversation with some University of Tennessee professors this past Friday.
And they're 100% bought in.
Well, interestingly, though, the professors, one in particular, I asked, how are things going? So it's not very good because the students aren't showing up to some of their classes online. That they're
smoking more weed, though.
That there are some real problems. Some are having with some of the attendance and work, and then. This was according to the professor, so I can't verify this because I didn't hear it myself, but he heard from the Knox County School Board superintendent that the students are not doing well with this online stuff.
Of course they're not.
Up to a quarter of the students are having real difficulties, maybe failing some of the classes.
But see, these have long-term consequences for society, and those can't be measured with current data. And again, it's breakdown of society, see?
Well, you've thrown out this year, so basically... as far
with
as
long-lasting effects, even if you start back to a normal life this year, you still have long-lasting effects from especially young children that have been wearing these masks and have been programmed to follow these stupid rules.
Well, and also the lack of schooling, the education, the lack of interaction this year... You're going to have a year of some of these kids falling completely behind.
And guess who's still got normal life and education going on? China does right now.
The
pandemic, they have no pandemic because they incinerated 20 million protesters and it's back to normal now.
You think 20 million?
20 million cell phones went offline within a month.
Do you think those people were incinerated?
Yep.
You do?
Absolutely.
They
had 40 portable incinerators in Wuhan running 24/7 for about a month. And we have satellite images of sulfur dioxide being produced in massive quantities, and that's produced when you burn organic material. They said that they were incinerating infected animal carcasses.
You think it's people?
Well, where are those protesters that were in Hong Kong and in mainland China?
I couldn't speculate, but that is a heck of a statement. 20 million.
You're not going to read about that in the mainstream media.
Well,
China's purpose, in my estimation, for this narrative, round up their protesters, number one, and eliminate them, and number two, to get out of the trade deal that Trump made with them for $200 billion. They did both of those things.
Well, Chas, Holly,
and they made profit on PPEs.
Luckily, you're not Chinese.
No. Yeah.
So the cell phone deal.
20 million are reported being offline.
That's some real shit.
I've read it. I mean, maybe it's not true. But I don't see protesters anymore. Just get on the train. It's a short ride.
So what's going to take place in the United States with the protesters now? Is all that gone?
No, absolutely not.
No.
We're in for some hard times here, because when this election gets in the courts and they overturn the mainstream media narrative with all this criminal activity, there's going to be peaceful protesters that are out burning buildings and rioting and killing people. We're going to have we've got a lot of hard times ahead. But I think when we get to the other side, there's going to be a reset of a lot of things. You know, these globalists want a reset, but we're going to get our own reset. We're going to get the criminals out of government and controlling our lives, and we're going to have news organizations that report news instead of propaganda.
So all this doom and gloom, you're actually hopeful
that
yes, things will be better.
Well, truth is on our side. And God's on our side. But we're the tools that have to make it happen.
And why isn't, I know Wang and I look at each other because we have these discussions every morning. Why, Steve, why isn't there more people like us thinking like this? What has, I know we talked about smart and hillbillies, but what is it? Because Chewy and I look at each other and we know, why are people not thinking like us?
I think that it's multifaceted. I mean, certainly there's been mass psychological operations with Hollywood and movies and violence and all the other narratives we talked about socially. But I think a lot of people have comfortable lives in the United States and they want to keep it going. And they think if, they've been conditioned not to rock the boat because then, somebody's not going to like them. They're going to bully and they're going to tell them that they're not, they're not socially correct or they're not politically correct. Or there's something. They don't want to rock the boat. That's a bell curve. Most people are right here and they don't want to rock the boat.
Yeah.
I saw a quote recently and I've been sharing it with people and it's so true. Our founding fathers were dangerous men. We need more dangerous men.
Elaborate.
Well, countries that have weak men never survive. And we have a lot of weak men. They've been neutered.
I've seen a lot of weak.
And this has nothing to do with men and women have different roles in life, and they're both vital, or we wouldn't survive as a society. But if you have weak men, you cannot have a society that lasts. Men need to stand up and take responsibility and make our world good again.
I agree. I've seen scared and weak. 8 months? When did this start? March?
Yeah, beginning of March, end of February. Sorry before that, but I mean, it really came in full.
Well, see, this whole thing, it never gets easier than today, because next week it'll be harder, and 2 months from now, everything gets harder the longer you let it go. People have to realize they have to stand up and fight. They can't wait for things to blow over, because it's not blowing over unless a critical mass of people stand up and resist this and say, I want my country back.
Yeah.
And this election outcome, see, the continued psyops with the mainstream media trying to already call the election. Well, the election's not over. It hasn't been certified. There's massive criminal activity that's been documented, and it will play out in the courts, and the correct decision will be made, and there will be massive protests and burning. That's what these people have tried to take over a country by chaos and violence, and then so far they've been doing it. And that's why people have to stand up and fight.
And what's wrong with that statement that he says? Why does that scare people of what Dr. Smith is saying with that statement?
The what?
Stand up and fight.
I think it's no longer socially acceptable to fight.
They've been conditioned to think that they can't do that. That's just not. Society will look at them and isolate them and point at them.
So more sheep than lions.
Oh, absolutely. But that's how life's always been. Really, the Revolutionary War was fought by a small percentage of patriots. And it's a small number of people trying to run the world. When you start really... And that the things that are different today is mass media. Even though it's the mainstream media is controlled, humans have never had the ability to communicate so rapidly, and they can't stop that. And so people have a huge amount of power if they will just use it.
They're exercising that in Europe more so.
Well, see, if Europeans had guns, it'd already be over. And that's the only thing keeping Americans free right now, or what freedom we have left. If they ever were to get your guns, we'd be done. And the U.S. is the last country standing in the way of global takeover. So, in fact, we have many unconstitutional gun laws now, and they all need to be eliminated. There's not limits on your right to bear arms. And a lot of these states have put false restrictions on that right.
Unconstitutional.
Right.
100.
They chip away at it all the time. But people, part of the education system, people don't know the Constitution, they don't know their rights, and they get to be adults, and they keep losing their rights, and they don't even know it.
Yeah, there may be some truth to that. But so I started this year reading a book about Frederick Douglass.
Yeah.
Phenomenal book. And then I'm ending this year reading a book by Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
Oh, yeah.
I read...
What volume are you on?
3.
Oh.
I'm almost done.
You've pounded through 2.
Yeah. It's
frightening, isn't it?
It's incredible read. And I think those two are great reads for all. They're heavy, and especially when it comes to the Gulag Archipelago. We really need to, if you want to understand how special America is, as far as the divisiveness, it's part of it. That's part of the equation of having a free society. Okay, so where you have multiple views, multiple ways of thinking, and hashing it out through truthful dialogue, and that's what free speech is. Free speech is to be uncomfortable.
And see, the foundation of that, though, is respect for others.
Sure, and
allowing them to have their freedom. And see, the people trying to control us don't believe in that.
Well, and the truth of word, right? Truthful words is what helped Frederick Douglass, one of the most important orators of all time, speak his version of the truth in order to emancipate himself and others. And I would say the same thing about Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who did not have that freedom at all whatsoever. Read the Gulag Archipelago. It's going to be 1,800 pages of hard work, but it's amazing. And without those voices in a Western world to hear those voices and at least agree, disagree, discern over the information, your society could be destroyed as a result of your lack of free opinions, free thought. What has been striking to me is that censorship of some of the information, whether you agree with it or not, has been going on en masse with some of the newer technologies that are out there, mass media, and also social media and everything else. You should question it yourself. What is so dangerous about words? What is so dangerous about people expressing a different opinion from what is out there as far as information and other opinions? And if your words of truth, the way that you think, should be prized before all, okay? Because there's a reason why it's number one, the First Amendment, okay? Your ability to speak in Congress together, to think on your own, to say things that are uncomfortable, okay? Because it's really that freedom of speech is something
It's being told what to do.
See,
it's not supposed to be a freedom of speech that is nice and very pleasing in terms of the words that you say. It's the truth can be oftentimes incredibly uncomfortable. Someone else's opinions could be incredibly uncomfortable, but that should be prized before all else as the founding principle of our nation and how a free society works. If you do not have that,
what we were talking about earlier,
we're going to have some big problems in our own country.
I mentioned this to you earlier, and people get offended when I say it, but our Constitution ensures some degree of racism because of free speech. But in a free society, in a capitalist society, that's bad business. Even if someone feels that, it doesn't really play out over time. But see, it gets fueled by our media, and Obama massively pushed this narrative to break people apart, and because if you can separate people, then you can control them easier, and you create people fighting amongst themselves while the government and the globalists are coming in on us because we're fighting amongst ourselves. So we need to get over this nonsense. I mean, our country is founded on personal freedoms, personal responsibility, opportunity. Everybody isn't born with the same hand, but you still have opportunity to grow and to improve yourself. And that is important for everyone. Make the most of your hand.
Yeah.
And don't, if you're born with a certain hand, do the best with that. Don't be jealous of what someone else has. There's always going to be people with more and less than you have, but use what you have.
Amen.
That's what our country's about.
Personal sovereignty, personal responsibility.
Right. And that's what we're talking about, too, about medical care. The first step in creating a social society is government health care. People have to be in charge of their own health care. If you're not in charge of your own body and your own decision-making for your health, then we don't have a country.
Charlie and I have talked about our personal responsibility with health a lot, and the lack of health narrative in today's health care crisis of the pandemic has been shocking to me.
Our allopathic medicine is based on sickness. It's not based on wellness.
Right.
It's based on pharmaceuticals that are manufactured by these globalist multinational corporations that look at the news at night. Who pays for the news? Big pharma, mostly.
Well, a passive view on health. I need something to make me feel better and or
There's
be
a
healthy.
pill.
There's a shot. There's a whatever. In order for us to be healthy again, you have to wear this mask. To be healthy again, it's a crock of crap to me, because your health is in your hands. You've got plenty of that's out there. Chaz, I know you're biting at a bit to talk about this.
I still go back. First of all, being told what to do doesn't sit well with me. I don't have a business like that. Wasn't going to be a 9-to-5 guy. I understand that. I go back to this because it really throws me off a lot, because I've been sitting in my own bubble, wood gym, house, mountain bike, grill out, eat, whatever I've been doing. Not going out and outside of other cities until I get out there. Is the mask a law?
It is in some places.
Like, you have to wear a mask or you get arrested, or you can't come in and eat, or you can't shop at
in
Costco.
Nashville right now, I know somebody that's been arrested
for not wearing
a mask. Yeah.
They have a Democratic mayor?
Of course.
Shocker.
Yeah, shocking.
Mm-hmm.
That just eats away at me. It really,
When was that law passed?
That's the biggest thing.
Well, it was the mayor instituted that, and I don't know the exact politics in Nashville. I know that is in place right now. Now, I don't know if the mayor just made a mandate or whether their city council or their county commission actually approved that. I can't state that. I know that here, our health board is the one making the decision.
We talked about that.
Which is totally unconstitutional.
Because they're not elected, right?
No.
Well, not only are they not elected, they don't have the authority in our Constitution to make law.
So does it
only the state legislature can make law.
That's what I was wondering. Where
Does
do
that
these
hold
laws
up?
come from?
And see, our health board here locally has made mandates like an executive branch. They've made laws like the legislative branch, and they've made punishments like the judicial branch.
The sheriff,
they're acting as a dictator with no accountability.
The county sheriff is not supportive of the mandates. So if you don't have that enforcement arm, at least in the county side, the mandates that they're pushing will not be enforced. I can't speak for the city, but the county.
Well, the city is under the control of the city mayor, and they actually changed the structure of the power of the police, where the city mayor now has control over them without a process of grievance with civil service, which is a dangerous thing. It was passed in the dark of night, and so the police are under the control of the city mayor. And so, see, the county sheriff has a responsibility to uphold the Constitution, the state and the federal. The city police have the responsibility to enforce local rules and regulations. So there's a difference in their responsibilities. And when they're under the control of the city mayor and the city mayor is against the citizens, that's a bad situation.
So, Chaz,
it's a misdemeanor right now. I don't know the current exact wording, but it is a misdemeanor that you can be arrested for in the city
of not wearing a mask.
I don't know if it's actually been done.
I'm back on the mask thing because I don't have a problem if people want to wear masks.
Sure, freedom. If they want to wear a mask, wear it out.
But my problem is somebody telling me and then me getting bullied it just doesn't make sense. I shouldn't have to wear a mask if I don't want to, correct?
This is another important point we were talking about earlier. Herd immunity is still a myth until somebody proves otherwise. It's a dogma that is accepted, and most doctors believe in it. But the underlying premise of herd immunity is that an underlying magical number of organisms in a group that become resistant or immune to a pathogen remove that pathogen from the environment and protect other individuals that may enter that group. And that is a totally false premise that's never been shown. It's all about individual immunity. Pathogens are not removed from an environment by being immune to them. You learn to live with them without disease. We have billions of viruses and bacteria in our body, and most of them provide positive vital functions to keep us healthy. And so when somebody gets sick, it's because their immune system is dysfunctional. They're not healthy. So when you learn to live with an organism or a potential pathogen, it doesn't mean that you've killed it and it's gone away. That's a totally false narrative. And so they use this herd immunity concept to force vaccinations for the greater good on people. And that is an important concept that we need to dispel, because your good health isn't automatically imparted on somebody else by being in that group. That's ridiculous.
So is the social distancing, which we're not doing at a round table, does that work? Because if I have to look at one more newscast or, the football games and everybody's 6 feet apart while they're trying to talk on the same panel, does that help?
No.
Well,
is there any science behind that?
Social isolation and the lack of distance can wreck your health. That is something that I can't believe. We have known about what happens if you isolate yourself from human contact.
Yeah,
and it
look
will
at
destroy
babies.
Your health. It will destroy your health. What is the most important part of birth, right after birth? Is
bonding with the mother.
The skin-to-skin contact with the newborn infant to the mother, okay? That is one of the most important things, the first part of life. That is what you're supposed to do, right? When you socially isolate yourself from other human beings, it will destroy your health. And we are seeing that right now. And when I'm telling you
part of the narrative,
when I am telling you about what is going on locally, when you're talking about individuals that are self-harming either through drugs or alcohol or killing themselves, one of the largest factors in all of that is isolation. Okay. And also losing maybe your job, your well-being, all those factors in and
and then it compounds it.
So we know for a fact that social isolation is a health wrecker.
Yeah,
for sure. And so why aren't we talking about that as part of the equation to health and well-being? It does not make
Well, the first
sense.
thing you need to do is turn your TV off. I tell people the only way you catch COVID is to have your TV on. It's transmitted through the TV. And if you can turn that off, you'll be well. So I wanted to say another thing about these mask studies that have been published. When I read through these things, what they do in a lot of them, they measure droplets and aerosols, and they measure those and the distance they go when you sneeze. No one that I've read has shown the transmission of disease from those droplets.
No.
So if there's no transmission, I don't care how far a sneeze goes.
Right. And
doesn't matter.
The plumes and the fancy
Doesn't
models.
matter.
I've read all of those, and that is not prospective studies that show.
You're
whether
worried
or not,
about disease transmission.
It does not. It is not science in the terms that we need it in order to show whether or not this thing works or not.
But
it's not.
I've read other papers that take multiple studies that measure particles, plumes, and droplets, and so forth. And then they do statistical analysis of each paper, and then they create this statistical model that looks very scientific, but it still doesn't tell you anything.
Well, in these natural experiments that they've or observational studies that show that, well, when you have mask mandates, this drops or this drops. But it's like
there's too many variables. It's not controlled.
The data collection is methodologies can be screwed up for sure, and it is not randomized prospective studies. I could turn the audience on to Oxford epidemiologists that fully agree with my statements here. That until we have those studies, you cannot call it science.
It's not science
or provable science. And so,
science isn't studied anymore. It's bought. It's manufactured and bought today. Because a lot of the papers that are written today cannot withstand objective scientific scrutiny. They have a narrative they want to push, and they pay people to push it. And that's how it goes. That's why you have to have discernment and critical thinking.
I don't know what happened to Chaz again. Every time
the heat was too much.
I think we're pretty close to the end of all of this. Chaz, I think we're welcome back.
Yes.
It's almost time to wrap up. But I would like for you and Holly, as panelists, to close it up and tell us what your final thoughts are. I think we've gone through all of your bullet points that you wanted to talk about, Dr. Smith. Chaz, Holly.
We didn't mention Event 201.
Let's go.
Event 201 was held in New York City on October 18th of 2019, which was about 5 months before the pandemic hit the U.S. And it was put on by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, by
Johns Hopkins,
the World Economic Forum, and by the Bloomberg School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins. And it was an exercise in a global pandemic with the coronavirus. They were so omniscient. And they played out how that might look. And voila, a few months later, we end up with one. Incredible.
Was it October 2019?
October 18th of 2019.
And that's facts. So
yeah, you can look it up. Go look it up.
Yeah, so
Event 201.
When
Event 201.
His balls broken. He could just go, those are facts.
Well, just look it up. I mean, you don't have to agree with Dr. Smith, but look up Event 201 and see what you think. And if his facts are correct about Johns Hopkins, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and all of these individuals that were basically wargaming
the same people that planned the pandemic in 2017 at the World Economic Forum.
What's interesting, too, if you look at the predictive model from Oxford that helped shut down the world's economy and also the IHME data, and you look at who funded those two institutions, tens of millions of dollars.
Mostly with our taxpayer money.
It would be the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yeah, when he gives money away, it's rarely his own money. It's our taxpayer money that he's received through his nonprofits. And then he acts like he's benevolent and giving away all his money. His trust fund has doubled in value between 2010 and 2020. But he said his personal wealth, he's giving away his personal wealth. His personal wealth's in his trust fund. So he gets money from our government for nonprofits that he administers, and also owns patents on a lot of these things. So he's not benevolent giving away his money. He's giving away our money. We're funding our own destruction.
So maybe you don't. Maybe
with
you
him
don't,
and other people.
Maybe you don't disagree. Maybe you disagree with Dr. Smith, but look at those facts.
But that's a problem, and that's what I wanted to say.
Look at those facts.
Nobody does.
Right.
They just want to throw shade on Dr. Smith
or
you.
They can throw all the shade they want. I love shade.
I know you do. That's what makes you so awesome. But they don't look up the facts. They already go, he's a babbling idiot. Chewy, what, they don't look at any numbers. And like we all said, even in the business of what I do, numbers don't lie.
So look at the numbers, look at the facts of what Dr. Smith is saying about these individuals.
Yeah, but that goes back to the fact that you said earlier about the bell. They're comfortable. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to know.
Well, human nature...
But then don't throw shade at people.
Well, human nature is... but if it's something that changes their narrative, the cognitive dissonance thing, which has become a trite term now, but it's true. People, if they believe something different than what they currently believe, it's uncomfortable, and it changes their view of the world, and people don't naturally want to do that.
No, it's really difficult.
Right. Or they say it behind closed doors, but when they're challenged or it's out in public, they go back to the sheep. But they're lying in their comfortable setting, and then they walk out. And that's what makes this panel real badasses, in my opinion.
Well, they're comfortable in their mama's basement.
Yeah, 100. Yeah. Yes, you're right. You're right, though. But that's my biggest take on that is do your homework before you start.
Look at it.
See,
look at
the
what
thing
he's
is,
saying.
I mean, I don't care if people criticize. The truth is the truth. So go look it up. You don't believe something, go look it up. You got new data that makes sense. I'll look at it and I'll agree with it if it's real. If it's not real, it's bullshit.
This is never going to get aired.
This is definitely getting there because the thing you take away is the bell curve. I mean, I see that every day in my business too. Is
no one wants to rock the boat.
Nobody wants to rock the boat, and I see it with all the people that come through here that are buying into it. It disturbs me. I mean, it really disturbs me.
It's dumbfounding. It's like,
I mean, we could go back to his son in high school. Harrison put so much work in to training, and he was steroids were in his body from Patron training, and that's what made him so good. It made the work that he did and the choices that this man made to have him come over and train with me. And even back then, he was a maverick and said, hey, it's not power clean in here. We're not hurting his back anymore. In high school, he's not doing those lifts. He's doing that. We had our own agenda that was outside, and I've gotten that before from coaches, saying, oh, you do this and that there. That's why they produce this. It's just
basically saying that you're cheating in some way, or there's no possible way that being outside of the box could actually be.
And I've been outside
effective.
The box my whole life, and I
this
think
is the
Dr.
thing.
Smith has too.
Yeah.
And it's like we get our balls broken all the time.
No.
It's still the same way here.
Yeah.
Well, I think you have to decide for yourself how you're going to be as an individual. But if you seek the truth and you do things the right way, then people are going to criticize you no matter what. So it doesn't bother me one way or another. The truth is the truth.
But they don't pull up the numbers. I mean, it's the same thing. They don't pull up the numbers. Like Chewy, you get your balls broken from your peers and colleagues, and you're like, just do your homework before you start disagreeing or not agreeing because it's not the cool thing to be and liked, which we have to have a whole bunch of likes this society, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to be liked,
Yeah.
Or I don't know how I live with myself because I'm not part of the sheep community. But I still see the circles, the 6 feet distancing at Ace Hardware store. It's
I
like,
ignore those.
or
Me too.
I just walk
And
right up.
and I was the only one when I voted that didn't have a mask too. But no one said anything.
Nobody said
They
a
were.
word.
Yeah.
I went downtown to the city county building, the ladies working down there, they were as nice as could be.
I did think it was funny though that they have the pens all laid out on the table.
Yeah, but we didn't have Sharpies here.
You have to keep your pen. I made sure it was really dark though. You have to keep your pen, and then you throw it in a boxes when you leave because they're going to clean those.
Yeah.
Now how?
And those chemicals are good for you.
I'm like, this is so silly.
And in fact, some of those chemicals are probably put in the vaccines.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Inject them to you.
It was funny, but they didn't say a word, and there was no sign on the door because I sent a picture to Chewy and to Charlie, saying you had to wear a mask. But everybody did, but there was no sign on going into the school that said a mask is mandatory.
Well, I think a great way to end this is to talk about. We'll just mention the fact that to think on your own. Yes. To speak
and
your
do
truth,
some work, and you're going to have to get up off the couch, and you're going to have to within your own little world. You're going to have to start resisting the nonsense. So when I say fight, it's not physically at this point. It may be at some point, but you need to think about ways that you can improve your situation in your daily life and educate the people around you and wake up people to realize that we are at war and we have to, it's an unconventional war, but we're at war and we have to take our country back and put it back on its right course.
Take your America back. Let's get back to it. I think that's...
And those words scare a lot of people, what he just said. We're at war. It's going to be hard. Take our country. Like, nobody wants to do any of that. They earmuff it and, like you said, don't want to go down the rabbit hole of we're in some serious crisis. And it's time to stand up. And that's all he's saying.
Before it's too late.
Yeah, it doesn't get easier than today.
I like that one. That's what we should end on. I like it. Doesn't get easier than today. I love it. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for coming. Dr. Smith, it's been a long, long time, and I know you've been going through a lot of stuff on your own with fighting for your rights, and Dr. Choo's kept me up to date on that, and I thought it was a good time to get back, especially after the election, whatever that is, and get back and discuss.
We didn't talk about the fraud that's already been discovered and that they knew was going to happen, but the Hammer software program, which was developed in 2009 by Dennis Montgomery, has been used to spy on everyone in the country and especially politicians to coerce them into behaving in certain ways, and possibly a Supreme Court justice or more. And it was used actually in the 2012 election for cheating, to change votes. They can remotely change votes with that program. It's a spy program that was developed for the CIA and other spy agencies, and it's been used. It's called the Hammer, and there's a portion of it called the scorecard, and that's how they change votes electronically. All this is going to be coming out during these court.
Look it up.
It's going to be ahead. This guy predicts stuff. Yeah. All right, everybody. Happy Sunday, Ben. Get a haircut. Everybody, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.